areas and the parishes, but particularly the Ramsey Skate Park. I know there's a bit of an issue with an attenuation pond there, and the extension there to try and alleviate that rather than lose out is very welcomed. But I was going to say that obviously the previous, obviously having sat on the previous administration, there was an aspiration, I know, to see a lot more smaller projects come through, and rather than big individual projects that cost a lot of money and to sort of see in one area. I was going to ask, but I know you've almost touched on it, but is that aspiration going to continue, just to see a lot more smaller projects come forward and see a greater spread, rather than, I know we've got a couple of big things, infrastructure things coming forward, such as road improvements that we will be expected to contribute to. They're still going to be there on the horizon, obviously, but thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so under the current governance, which Councillor Sanderson referred to at the beginning, which was approved by Cabinet back in October 2020, the system is whereby we do have funding for the under £50,000 category, as you'll have seen in the appendix, which is agreed under delegated authority. There is no
personally, I think that would be good to keep that going if we can.
Any other questions? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Did you want to?
No, we're working. We're good. Thanks. Just by way to add to the previous conversation, I do think it's important just to set the scene as we move forward, that the government does have the infrastructure levy on its agenda, and there are potential changes proposed. So as we move through the year and as we learn more, which we hope won't be too far off, clearly we will have to take that back to the administration for consideration as to how we administer the tariff as we move forward. So with that in mind, I think it's, given the previous conversation, it's worth setting that in councillors' minds as the year progresses. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, with regard to the item for All Cumbria Flood Group, with regard to the traps, I was wondering whether you've given Buckton and various other additional time to get additional information. From the officer's report I've seen here, that you are not certain about certain items, whether they're going to get additional funding as well from the County Council and the EA for the work and the maintenance. If they were to get that assurance from those various parties, would that project then likely get SIL money or not? And if so, could you give them the same extension as you've given to Buckton?
Thank you. So obviously I can't preempt if there was another application. It's not appropriate for me to do that in terms of the specifics. What I can say in terms of this particular case, the feeling here is that this is about flooding. It should it falls within the Environment Agency. And what we would be strongly suggesting is actually that you work initially with the EA and the government funding that they've got to actually deal with the wider flood alleviation and actually work through them as part of that wider scheme to see how this could be progressed.
Sorry.
Thank you.
If I could just actually ask a question myself, actually, on this one, the smaller amounts of money, which I actually agree with Councillor Corney on, I actually often feel that some of our town and parish councils perhaps are not fully aware of the processes. It's certainly my own experience in terms of whether they actually are comfortable about putting in applications. Have you offered any training or general awareness on SIL?
So historically we have done training. We're also at the recent parish forum. Is it called forum? Thank you. Forum event that was held, and we spoke to a lot of people there, and we're contacted throughout the year, obviously, and we always will be offering guidance. We make contact with every parish council regularly to make them aware of if a round is coming, once it's open. So there is regular contact with all the parishes with regards to processing, and there's liaising with my team with regards to any queries that they have.
Okay, Councillor Corney.
I think I'll just add to that as well. I think us as members have a duty to take it back to our parishes as well. And I think that, we're made aware of when the rounds are coming up, aren't we? So it's, down to us to pass that on as well.
Yes, Councillor Pickering, sorry.
Yeah, so I was seeing 3.7 that there's 26 million currently available. So is that a sort of a normal level that we would have in the bank, or is there a shortage of projects applying? And I'm wondering if there are any deadlines for allocating or spending those funds.
Yes, you're right with regards to the circa 26 million. It's for this district. It's in this sort of an average region that we have. As you'll know from the report, if she can quickly find it, 3 point something. 3.3, we do reference the requirement for consideration of some significant strategic projects and funding that may be due to those projects. And as we're all aware, £26 million will not deliver a lot for us. So we're having to use it wisely and get as best value as we can from it. So in terms of other authorities, they will get more from particular urban areas and ones where they have a differing charging schedule that enables different collections. But 26 million, I think, is about the average we've been running for quite a few years as they're available, and then we'll spend an allocation through each round. It will drop down and we'll build it up through the receipts that then we get. So it's there as part of that requirement. And as 3.3 notes, we have an infrastructure funding statement that we have to produce a statutory requirement annually to note where SIL may be spent. And the 2 bullet points are specifically taken from that report as with regards to where, as a council, our priorities have been noted as where we'd spend SIL in the future.
Councillor Gardner.
Oh, sorry, Steve. Coley, yeah.
Corney.
Not Corney. I'm much better looking than him. I just wanted to ask a question, and I recognise that below 50,000, and based on what you've just said, we've got 26 million sitting in the bank, and yes, we've got to be careful. But as the representative of Great Staughton, I was disappointed that the £8,000 request for replacement street lighting was not seen to support development. I would argue staggering around in the dark is not a great advertisement for your village. So I'd like to understand, what is it somebody would have to do to get funding on SIL to get new street lighting, or there's just no chance at all, I guess is my question.
Well, I suppose it would be linked to growth. How would that better enable us to deal with the growth resulting from that development, and how would it mitigate that? I think that would be, if I'm speaking out of turn, do you want to come in there, Claire? Clara, sorry.
Thank you. In order to build on the theme about streetlights, we also have to be mindful about how we spend our money prudently. So SIL money is money that would otherwise be Section 106 money, and we should be using it to unlock growth. At the same time, we have to be mindful too of what obligations fall under other statutory providers. So that's not to take away from the role of street lighting within growth, but it's also too about us being prudent and using our money where it can best deliver outcomes. And in relation to street lighting, I'm going to be quite frank. I believe there's a conversation to be had with Cambridgeshire County Council in their role as the local highway authority about street lighting in the first instance.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you very much. I was just going to go back to flooding. So if a flood group or a parish council or a town council for that matter wants to put in a scheme to prevent flooding in their village or town, which is been a major issue in this district in 2020. How, and we have said going back that we would look to support communities that have been devastated. You know, in the villages I represent in Alconbury and Alconbury Western, over 100 homes were flooded, over 100 homes. And when you go round and see the state that has left people in, it is very upsetting. Now, I would like to know, the Alconbury Flood Group is getting money from the county council. It's working with the Environment Agency to get money for various other schemes. It's working with highways, national highways, to get money to improve flow underneath their structures and what have you. They're all looking to give money to assist the overall, to reduce flooding in the two villages of Alconbury and Alconbury West. I would like to know how HDC can assist in that through its SIL funding, or are you saying to this committee that no, we can't? I would just like to know how you can do that.
So I'll say a bit, and I think Clara will add a few more points. I think from our perspective, certainly that flooding infrastructure could be considered. It is infrastructure, so I'd say that point. Obviously, it's based on each individual project, so there isn't a one size fits all for me to give a definitive answer, and wouldn't be appropriate at this point. What I would say is, in this case, as I've mentioned, this is part of a bigger scheme, and it really needs to be working with that bigger scheme that the government itself is giving its money towards to actually deliver. And this is slightly separate to that, and certainly wasn't put forward in part of that scheme that we'd see the EA fund for as part of the significant funding government's given. So I would still be putting back on this particular one and the circumstances of this particular project, that actually the right course of action is that you have those further discussions with the EA and go back through them as part of the wider government initiative.
Thanks. And if I can build on that, it's also representing value for money in terms of how we invest still, notwithstanding it is about unlocking growth. So as Claire rightly said, I don't think this is the forum for us to be able to give a commitment. I think it depends on the scale and nature of the project and the value for money. In addition, as Claire rightly points out, if this was led by the Environment Agency to demonstrate that the interventions proposed will address the challenges raised and for the long term, and in addition be maintained accordingly, then that needs to come in as part of the project, at which time the team will assess it. But in the here and now, to give you the commitment you're looking for, we cannot do that. This has been assessed based on the information, but I think that needs to be a conversation taken back to the team and led by the authority on water in that regard that will give that commitment.
Thank you for that, Clara. That's very much appreciated. My question to start with is, if they got all that information to you in exactly the same way as you've asked for additional information for the Buckton schemes before you give the money, would then the Alconbury scheme would SIL money then be available to it if they got the information from the Environment Agency, the information that you require from the County Council and so on? If they got all that information and you said, oh yeah, that's fine, you know, would then SIL money be available or not? Because that's, I think, where I need to understand.
In short, we would be able to consider it. Beyond that, I'm afraid I cannot give you the commitment you're seeking tonight, but they'd be very welcome to submit that. And of course, we would consider it as officers and bring it back through the proper governance structure for consideration, which will ultimately be reported to this group and on to Cabinet.
Could I point out, Ian, I'll feed that back to the Cabinet, certainly, but we're working on the rules, the new governance that we're carrying over, obviously, from before May. But I do understand your concerns, and I certainly feed that back to Cabinet colleagues. I know you do stand up for your villages, don't you? You're very active, and I think that's admirable.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. You know, at the end of the day, I've got to, if I don't stand up for my villages, then it's a pretty poor do. And I will do that, and I will continue to do that. And when I think, you know, they're not quite getting what they deserve, then I will say that to you as a Cabinet member, and I will also talk to the executive leader on the same topic.
Thank you. Are there any more questions that we want to? Oh, Councillor Corn.
Sorry, just at the risk of maybe looking silly and asking the daft question. I'm just looking through some of the other ones, and obviously we've got the air ambulance. It's recommendation for approval. Has that round gone through yet, or is that coming up for Cabinet? I'm literally just going through it at the moment, trying to maybe answer my own question.
So, yes, so the air ambulance is one of the projects that we're for consideration tonight for approval, as was the Alconbury one that we've just been discussing. So those in section 4 of your report are the projects over £50,000, which we're considering as part of the recent round that we've held, and have got their recommendations within the report for your agreement or not today.
Said it with the silly one, didn't I?
Are there any more questions before we move on? So are we agreeing with all the recommendations going to Cabinet? Yes. Any more comments? Okay. Okay, so we now actually move to the last item, work programme. Comments? Yes. That's on the
sorry, that's clicked off. The ONS panel is invited to comment on the recommendations for the SIL allocation for the Cabinet report, which is attached. So the recommendations are at the Cabinet.
Well, that's the point of order. It states the Cabinet Committee is recommended, and then it looks like both Cabinet and Committee are being asked to agree.
That's just the wording of the Cabinet report. I think the committee word should have been deleted off of the template there on that one.
That's fine, but can I suggest in future then, Chair, that we get reports coming here that are in fact accurate, and we're therefore not confused as to what we're supposed to be doing here this evening.
I agree.
Thank you,
I think
Chair.
you make a valid point. I'm sure we'll take that further. So thank you for that. Okay, so have we finished on that item? So move on to the work programme. Item 5.
So On the work programme, the item on there is the working group that's on the represents on our outside bodies and drainage boards. That has been progressing at a pace. We are evidence gathering on that one at the moment. There are plans to meet with other councillors who are involved in some of the groups, along with some of the actual boards which are now in place, which will be setting up in the next couple of months, next couple of weeks rather. And that will come back. We'll report back to the panel at the next meeting and see how that's going. The current plan is to have that report finalised and to this panel and then on to cabinet early in the new year. So on that one. And then just to add on to the work programme, there is a meeting of both panels tomorrow evening. So if there's any suggestions of groups or topics that you would like to look at as ONS, please bring those to the meeting tomorrow so that we can develop that work programme into some more aspects for the group to look at. If there's any questions on either of those items, happy to take
I very
questions.
much recommend, obviously our opportunity to shape policies. So certainly put your recommendations in. Appreciated. Any other comments? No? Well, thank you for your time. That's very quick. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. I'll see you next time.